John Wesley was told he was too enthusiastic, and the Anglican Church lost him and Charles, who wrote thousands, literally thousands of beautiful hymns. They were considered too enthusiastic, and so that's how the Methodist Church was born. Wesley had no wish to leave the Anglican Communion, but the Anglican Communion had ossified. It had become a self-worshipping, self-perpetuating institution that turned means into ends. And so the truth was crucified, and we got Methodism. The years went by in Methodism, and there was a talented young couple called Catherine and Bill. Their last name was Booth. And when the organisation of Methodism began to determine and decree that William Booth could only preach within a certain circuit, not go outside of it, when they did that, the Salvation Army was born. So this is a tremendously piercing and vital theme that the Bible draws to our attention, that religious institutions, unless they are constantly reforming through the gospel, will ultimately crucify the Lord that established them. How sad and tragic it is. In this story, he who is the truth is confronted with false witnesses. Everything about the trial is illegal. It was illegal to hold trials at night, but he's first tried at night. It's illegal not to have counter witnesses, but all the witnesses are on one side. Everything here is illegal. Notice that Jesus responds to the admonition to say whether you're the Son of God. When he says you've said so, that was an idiom for that's true. And he quotes Daniel 7 about the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Please notice this text. It's a key text, verse 64. I tell you, hereafter you'll see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. At that point, he's standing. He says, soon you'll see me coming enthroned. At that point, he's a prisoner about to die. He says, when you see me in the future, I'll be coming as God. At that point, he's being judged. But he says, the time is coming when I will be the judge. One of the Gospels puts it this way: nevertheless, from now on, you will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven on the right hand of power. He came at the resurrection, when the earth shook. He came, in a sense, at the destruction of the city of Jerusalem, where once there'd only been 3 crosses outside the city. Now there were thousands. The Jews who'd rebelled against Christ and said his blood be on us and our children, they swallowed their jewels. The Romans were besieging them. At night they crawled up over the walls where the Romans were waiting, and they caught them, they cut them open, they took out the jewels, and then they strung them up on crosses. Jesus came in 70 AD with the destruction of Jerusalem. He came at the fall of the Roman Empire. He came at the time of the French Revolution, when the church owned 1/3 of the land and most of the wealth and were neglecting the common people. He came again in the Russian Revolution, though it became a scene of terror. But Christ forever comes to shake up the world so that people are forced to make decisions and to turn to the true privilege of service, the reason for our existence. Hereafter you'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. And the high priest tears his robes, and thus he symbolized the tearing up of Judaism to take place in his day. It was forbidden to do that, but he did it. Then it says they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him. And another of the Gospel says they blindfolded him. Please observe that everything that happened to Christ is what we deserve. Christ is a sign to all of us. Because we're proud of our appearance, he's spat on. Because our ears itch for flattery, he hears curses. Because we've abused our liberty, he's tied to a pillar, and his hands are bound. Because we've loved the wrong things, his side is slit open just under the heart. Because we've used our minds to think bad thoughts, his brow is pierced with thorns. Because we've carried idols, so to speak, his back is whipped. Nothing happened to Christ but what deserves to happen to me and to you. So we see him here as our substitute and as our representative. Remember, the key meaning of the cross is if one died for all, then all died. 2 Corinthians 5:14. God hath made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. As it puts it in Romans chapter 5, it says, while we were yet sinners, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son. That's Romans 5:10. While we were yet sinners, we were reconciled. Before we were born, we were reconciled. Long before we were converted, we were reconciled. It's a matter of whether we'll accept it. While we were sinners, we were reconciled. Yes. When did the lamb die in Egypt? Before the Exodus. It didn't wait till they were in Canaan. The lamb died while they were still in captivity. The first Passover. And as the first Passover lamb died while the Jews were still in bondage, so Jesus died for us while we were still in the bondage of sin. And the meaning of the cross is that he took my place. He was my representative, which means it's counted that I did what he did. That's why Martin Luther said, mine are Christ living and dying, as though I'd lived his life and died his death. So the New Testament says in Galatians 2:20, we were crucified with him. We were crucified with him. When he died as our representative, heaven looked down and saw the whole human race crucified legally. We were in him. You see, we were ruined without asking for it in the first Adam. We were in him, seminally. As every tree comes from an original acorn, we, trees of humanity, come from the original acorn of Adam. So we were ruined without asking for it in our first representative, but we've been redeemed without asking for it in our second representative. And the meaning of the cross is he's my representative and he's my substitute. There's a difference between these two. They're complementary truths. It doesn't say in 2 Corinthians 5:14, if one died for all need not die. The meaning of him as a representative is that God counts it that what he did, I did. So the New Testament would say we were buried with him, Romans 6. Colossians 3:1 says, if you be risen with Christ. Ephesians 2:6 says we're seated with him in heavenly places. So everything he did is put to our account. None of us kept the Ten Commandments perfectly, but he did. It's put to our account. There's never been a Sabbath keeper since the fall, but he did it properly, and it's put to our account. There's never been one that loved God and loved his fellow man as much as they ought, except Jesus. It's put to our account. And then he's my substitute. He does it instead of me. This is the meaning of the cross. This is the meaning of Gethsemane. And when we read the 67th verse, but they spat in his face and they struck him, some slapped him, saying, prophesy to us, this is telling what I deserve. He endured what I should endure. Come now to the story of the interview with Pilate. Come please to John's Gospel in chapter 18 and verse 28. Chapter 18 and verse 28. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was early. They themselves didn't enter the praetorium so they might not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them. Please note, they take Christ to where Pilate is staying, where the praetorian guard is. But these hypocritical Jews who are about to murder a righteous man, who don't try him fairly, who bring in false witnesses and bribe them, these hypocritical Jews won't step over the threshold with Christ. They shove him through the door into Pilate's house. That's what it means when it says in verse 28, they themselves didn't enter. And notice that they might eat the Passover. These Jews were the most zealous religionists of all history and the most rabid and murderous bigots of all history. Again,